guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Priscilla. I am a Nigerian women's wear designer based in London, and this is one of those videos that was so requested that I felt that if I didn't do it soon enough, some people would literally come knock on my door and ask me, sis, where the video at? So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make the patterns for a bomber jacket. I have one on right now, and it's just a simple bomber with long sleeve, cuffed jersey rib on the sleeve and on the waist of the bomber, as well as the collar. So if you guys would like to see how to make this pattern, then keep on watching. If you're new on the channel and it's your first time seeing me, thank you so much for stopping by. Make sure to watch all the way to the end so you'll be able to recreate this pattern for yourself. So if you'd like to see how this pattern is made, then keep on watching. These are the tools and materials I'm going to be using to create this bomber. I've laid them here nice and flat. I've gotten my pattern paper, which I have already linked down below if you're curious. I will also be needing my sleeve block, which I have a separate tutorial for, but I'll be making a few changes in this project to just make it sit nicer on the shoulder. I also have my basic bodice front and back because we're going to be needing them. I've also collected my set square and my pattern master. I will also need my marker pen so you can see what I'm doing clearly. I also need tape measure to take down some measurement and a paper scissors. So as for fabric, I've already decided what I want, but I don't know how soon I'll be able to sew this thing together. So give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to see a sewing tutorial, and I'll just make it happen as soon as possible. I've also gotten some black lining as well as black ribbed jersey. You want to get something that is stretchy and has sort of that rib that would make it look really cool and trendy. I just have about half a meter here because I've had this particular piece for a while, and it usually comes in tubes like these because jersey is a knitted fabric. I'll also be combining this off black denim in combination with the print. I've also gotten myself some interfacing to make my facings nice and stiff around the neck of this jacket. I also have a long zip that is 60 cm long, and I think I would prefer something that has a metal teeth, but this is all I have right now, so I'm going to be working with that for the time being. So I just want to get some details clear and out in the air. This is the bomber design. It's long sleeve. It has a zip in the center front. The ribbed jersey sits on the cuff, the waist, and the collar, and it has a pocket in the seam on the front of the jacket. So the first thing I'm going to be doing here is to start out with my front panels, and there are a lot of panels for this jacket, so just sit, relax, and enjoy, and get a cup of tea, coffee, juice, or whatever, and just really soak it all in. So right now I'm just tracing around my front bodice. We're not going to be needing the darts, so I'm just tracing around the neckline, around the arm curve, around the shoulder, as well as indicating the hip line. So I'm just going in here to refine my lines using my pattern master, and I'm also going to be extending my front arm curve by 3 centimeters because I want the jacket to sit a bit looser on my body, and I want that fit to start all the way from the bottom of the arm curve all the way to the hem of the jacket. So the width of the bodice is going to be the same from the chest, at the waist, and at the hip. It's just going to basically be a big square because by the time you attach that jersey sort of hem, is going to cinch in the waist and create that bulky fit that bomber jackets normally have. So I'm also going to drop my front neckline by 3 centimeters because we're going to be attaching a collar that goes all the way from the front and goes into the back as well. So I'm just going to take my pattern master and connect that new 3 cm drop to the original old shoulder and just draw everything in nice and correctly. So I'm going to mark the midpoint on the main bodice as well as along the hem because we're going to be dividing this front into 2 panels. So I'm going to link that notch that is on the sleeve to that middle point that I marked in the middle of the bodice and connect that to the middle of the hem, as you can see here. So what this is going to do is it's going to divide the front panel into 2, and that is where we're going to be fixing our pockets. But for the time being, I'm just going to refine my lines and then mark where my pocket is going to sit. So my pocket sits 6 cm above the hem and is 15 centimeters wide. You can make yours wider, but I just thought having it moderate size would work for me. So I'm going to have panel 1 and panel 2. So the next thing here I'm just going to do is to trace off these two different panels, add my seam allowances, just indicate what is what, as well as drawing my grain lines and take note of how many panels I would need per pattern. So the pocket is going to sit in this area that I've notched here, and you would need 2 pieces per pattern. So one set goes to the left and the other set goes to the right. So I'm just going in here to cut out my pattern pieces. I'm cutting this one that will go on the side, which I think I would use a different material to make, and then this piece that goes on the center front, one for the left and one for the right. I think I might use the print in this middle. I really haven't decided yet, but these are the patterns, main patterns for the front. So as you can see, I have this area that I have notched, and that is where our pocket is going to sit. You can either decide to do this method or just have one piece for the front and then create a patch pocket or a jet pocket, whichever you prefer. But for this particular tutorial, I'm going to be sticking to the inseam pocket. So I'm going to go on and plan my front facing, because I just like to have facings along necklines of jackets and blazers, because it makes that neckline sit nicer on the body. So the facing is 7 centimeters wide, and I'm just using my pattern master to mark 7 cm from the center front along all the way to the neckline, and I'm going to connect these points together so I can go ahead and trace my facing onto another pattern piece. There's a lot of tracing and connecting in this tutorial, so just be aware. So I'm also going to be adding a notch, because the facing has to be attached to the lining on the inside of the jacket. So the piece that is closer to the bottom is the facing, and the one on the other side is going to become the lining. So I'm just going in here to trace off my facing piece, connecting my lines together using my pattern master and my marker pen, and just add all of the notches that I need, so when it's time to actually join the pattern pieces together, I know what goes with what. Once I'm done tracing off the facing, I'm going to go ahead and trace off the lining panel, which sits on this side closer to the top of the screen, using my dash lines, as well as indicating that notch, because that is going to be sort of the linking point between the facing and the lining for the front. I'm also going to go in and draw a grain line, because this is the direction in which you should cut the pattern, and you would need 2 pieces of this front lining to go for this jacket, one on the left and one on the right hand side. So once these are done, I'm going to go ahead and add my seam allowances all the way around. As you can see, I've added a 1 cm seam allowance on the center front, because I'm going to be fixing a zip on the center front of this bomber. I've added my seam allowances around the lining as well, and this will just help me cut it out nice and neatly when it's time to actually sew this bomber jacket all together. So I'm going to go on and plan the inseam pocket, which we spoke about earlier on. As you can see, I've already marked where the pocket is supposed to fit into, but I've not indicated what shape and what size the pocket is. So I'm going for a 10 cm wide pocket, and I'm just drawing by freehand, because the pocket is usually circular in shape. It goes all the way around like this, and just ensure it's wide enough to sort of fit your hand before going ahead to commit by connecting the dash lines like I'm doing here. So thankfully, this pattern master has these sort of weird curves on the inside that helps me link all of my points together and help me create the right shape that I want for my pocket. I've also added a notch, because the pocket bag usually has 2 pieces which you sew together to create this piece here that goes inside of that inseam to make the pocket for the front. So I've already cut out the pattern piece, and it's a little bit small. I would rather have it small and sort of moderately sized than have it too big and it create bulk on the front of the jacket. You have the freedom to make yours as big as you want or as small as you want. Next up, I'm going to be planning the waistband, which sits at the hem of the front all the way to the back. And I'm going to be making this waistband 2 cm smaller than the actual width of the bodice, because the waistband is going to be in a stretchy material. And the science of stretchy fabrics is when you're making the pattern for them, you make the pattern smaller by how much stretch that fabric has. So this jersey material has about 2 cm stretch, give or take. This you have to sort of figure out when you're buying the material, and whenever you're making the waistband, you want to ensure that it's just 1 or 2 cm smaller than the actual sort of width of the bodice, so the material and the bottom, which is stretchy, has enough room to sort of create that gathering effect that the waistband of a bomber normally has. Next up, I'm going to be planning the collar for this bomber, and the first thing I'm going to be doing is to trace off the front neckline, as you can see here, onto fresh pattern paper. I've also added a notch because this will help us know where the collar is supposed to sit along the neckline of the jacket. So I'm also going to be extending upwards by 10 cm, which is half of the back neckline, and I'm just ensuring this particular point is straight, because if it's not, it's going to have a weird shape when you cut this out on fabric. So once I've drawn out my line, I'm just going in here to double check that it's actually 10 cm, which is half of the back neckline, and yes, that is correct. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be squaring up by 6 cm up the center back, and this is going to be by how much the collar is going to stand on the back of the neck of the jacket. So this particular part will have to cut on the fold, except you want to seam, but normally I would just cut that piece on the fold. And I'm going to be extending the front neckline by 1 cm so it sits nicely into the center front seam of the jacket. So once I've done that extension, I'm going to be connecting that extended point to the 6 cm mark of the center back of this collar piece. So this is the collar piece right now. The next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding seam allowances along the neckline, but this straight point that is towards the bottom, which goes from the back to the front, has to be cut in the fold as well. So I'm just going in here to add my 1 cm seam allowance along the back as along the front, and then just finish it off nicely and cut off this pattern piece, which we're going to be attaching to the neckline of the jacket. I've gone ahead and cut out the collar piece, as well as written what exactly it is and how many pieces I will need, and it will be cut on a bias. That's why the grain line is in that direction. So I'm going to move on to plan the back pieces, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trace off the armhole, neckline, shoulder piece, as well as the hem of the back panels, because we're going to be ignoring the darts just like we did for the front. So I'm going in with my pattern master to connect my dashed lines together. This is my center back, as you can see here. I'm going to draw in my neckline, filling my arm curve, as well as draw in the side seam of the back of the bomber. So like we did for the front, I'm going to be extending that arm curve by 3 centimeters because I want to add more volume to the fit of this jacket, and this is how I like to do it. So once I've done that, I'm going to be ensuring that the silhouette is boxy like the front, having the same measurement that is on the arm that is at the waist and will be at the hem as well. So once I've marked all those points, I'm going to be connecting them together using my pattern master. So we just have, like, you know, one straight line going all the way from the bottom of the arm curve down to the hem. So I'm also going to drawing my hemline for the back panel. So because I want a back yoke, I'm just going to plan that first. You can just skip this entire process if you just want a simple plain back, but I want a yoke on the top of the back of the bomber, and I think I might have a different fabric here. So the bottom like this has to be straight, and then it curves like this into the arm curve of the back, and it's about 8 centimeters from the shoulder point. So this is a point where you have the freedom to be as creative as you want, or you can just leave it the way it is, and that would divide the back panel into 1 and 2. So next up, I'm going to be planning the back facing. The facing is 8 centimeters wide, which is the same for the front, and I'm just going to ensure that that is sort of the same width all around the back facing. So I'm connecting my dash lines together using a different color of pen so I don't just confuse myself and end up confusing you guys. And I'm just connecting my dash lines together, ensuring everything is nice and smooth and there are no weird wonky lines. I'm just going in to write that that particular piece is the facing. For the back lining, I would need to extend the center back by 2 cm, and normally what you do with that extension is you pleat it back into the center back of your garment so you have room to move when you wear this jacket or this bomber in the future. So as you can see, there are several panels for the back, but this particular piece here is going to be the bottom of the jacket, and the top part, which I drew first, is going to be the yoke. This is going to be the facing, as you can see, and then the extended part belongs to the lining, which goes all the way around down to the side into the hem, as you can see here, and you normally would cut it on a fold. So I've just gone ahead and I've used colored pens to indicate what is what. The orange side is the facing, the green side is the lining, the blue area is the top back yoke, and the red side is the bottom of the back. So I'm just going to get myself fresh pattern paper and trace off my different panels. You have a total of 4 different patterns just for the back of this jacket, and I know it's a lot, but if you just want to leave it simple and plain, you can just have one panel for the back and just have your lining for the back as well. Just make sure to create your extension when you're doing your back lining so your jacket doesn't rip when you wear it over time. So I'm just going to go ahead and trace off my other pieces, add my seam allowances, and then come back and check in with you guys. These are all of my back pattern pieces traced out with seam allowances, but I haven't cut them out yet. So this is the back lining. As you can see here, I've added how many pieces I need to cut, written down the direction of the grain line. I've also traced off my back facing as well, which sits on the inside of the garment side along with the lining. So I've also gone ahead and I've traced out the bottom of the jacket, which is like this. You would cut this on the fold, except you want to seam on the center back. I've also traced off the back yoke, which sits on the top of this piece that we have on the bottom, and you would need to cut this on a fold, except you want to seam, but these are the main pieces for the back. So I've just gone ahead and I've cut them out, and I just want to show you guys how they would fit together. It's sort of like a puzzle, like some pieces just have to match, else nothing works. So the facing is sewn to the lining, and you have to pleat that 2 cm extension into the center back of the facing, and then the facing would sit into the neckline, and so on and so forth. So this is the bottom of the main back of the jacket, and this is the top of the main back of the jacket. So the back is divided into 2, the top part, which is normally called the yoke, and the bottom part, which is the bigger piece that you can see here. The final set of patterns I'm going to be working on is for the sleeve of this bomber, and I have my basic sleeve block here, which I'm going to be tracing off onto fresh pattern paper, which is taped down underneath of this one. So I'm just going ahead to transfer all of my notches because that helps me to know what side is the front and what side is the back. I'm also going to be dropping the sleeve head by 4 centimeters because this original sleeve block is just way too rounded and it has too much ease to fit into the bodice front and back of the bomber jacket. So I've already used a tape measure to measure how wide my front and back arm curves are on the front and back bodice, and that sort of has to match with the sleeve. So the back is 23 cm and the front is 25 centimeters. So I'm just going in here to double check that this front curve of the sleeve matches with the front arm curve of the bomber, and I have to do the same thing for the back. So if one side is too long, that would mean you would have excess on the top of the sleeve head when it's time to actually sew it together. After removing 2 cm from the back sleeve curve, I'm going to draw in the side seams for the front and for the back, and the sleeve length I'm going for is 63 centimeters long because I want it slightly longer than my actual sleeve length. So by the time we attach the cuff on the bottom, there is sort of bulk on the sleeve of this jacket. So I'm extending the side seams from the front and the back, and then I'm just going into drawing my sleeve hem like so. So I'm going to go in and double check that the side seams of the front and the back actually match, so I don't have any unpleasant surprises when it's actually time for me to sew. So I've gone ahead and I've drawn in my seam allowances inside of the lines that we just drew, added my grain lines, and indicated how many pieces I need to cut. So these are all of the pattern pieces we have done. They are quite a few, I have to say, but easy, slowly, eventually you will get there. So these are my front pieces. I just layered them on top of each other so I could have everything nicely spread out on the table. This is my collar piece, as you can see here, as well as the other pieces for the front. I've also laid down my back pieces, which are a total of 4, as well as the pattern piece for the waistband, which sits on the hem of this bomber jacket. So the one extra pattern that I did here was the sleeve cuff, which sits at the bottom of the sleeve, and it is 29 centimeters by 16. So by the time you fold it in half, you have a fold along the bottom of this cuff, and it sits into the seam of the hem of the top sleeve. So these are all of the patterns done and finished. If you'd like to see a sewing tutorial, please give this video a thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed watching, and until my next video, have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.